Hi and welcome back to my channel. If you are returning from watching my first video, thank you so much. I wanted to start this video by expressing my amazement and gratitude at the response that I had to my first video. I posted that video expecting to maybe have 4 or 5 people watch it and for it to basically flop and me feel very disappointed that I spent ages making it. So I was so shocked to see how many people watched the video and commented on it and seemed to have enjoyed it. That was really encouraging for me, and everyone's been so welcoming, so thank you. And I thought for my second video it might be good for me to run through everything I made last year, or kind of last year. So I started knitting in the middle of February of 2025 while I was on maternity leave, and my first knitting anniversary has just passed a few weeks ago. So yeah, I thought it would be good for me to run through everything I made in my first year of knitting, my experience of it, what I used, and how I'm feeling about the projects now. And that way everyone is up to date pretty much with everything I've made so far, and we can continue from there. As I say, I started knitting on like the 14th or 15th of February last year. I was a new mum, struggling to get used to the change of pace of my life from being a doctor, being very clinical and using my brain very academically, to just being everything about this newborn baby. And I needed something to use that part of my brain that was not being stimulated by just being a mum and a parent. So I started knitting because my mum was a knitter. She'd taught me as a teenager and she'd been knitting for my baby, and I thought that it was worth me trying that because it seemed to have some crossover with the whole there's lots of problem solving, following a specific structure when you're doing a procedure. It was really using my brain and maths, and it was just something to really focus on that wasn't my baby and being a mum. And I was able to do it when my baby was napping on me or while he was napping upstairs, and it honestly saved my mental health during my maternity leave. Yeah, and I haven't looked back since. So after all that waffle, I'm going to start by the first thing, my first full project. Now I'm going to be looking at my iPad while I go through this because I wrote down some notes so that I don't have to keep looking things up on the computer to remind myself. So please bear with me if I am looking down at my iPad. So I did a couple of like practice swatches while I was waiting for some proper yarn and needles to come that my mum gave me some scraps. And then I found a like beginner's knitting kit on Etsy, and I picked this scarf. It is called the Stripe Beginner Scarf by That Crafty Stitch. I believe they also have a physical store somewhere in the UK. So I started this on the 15th of February and finished it on the 20th. And I used the yarn that came with the kit, and it was 2 colours called Coffee Brown and Ecru, and this was a bulky weight yarn. The needles also came along with the kit. They were long straight wooden needles, and it was 10mm. So here is the scarf. It's the first proper thing that I made. So it is essentially just a garter stitch scarf. There's no fancy edging or details. It just taught me essentially knitting flat with no purl stitches. It showed me how to change colour on a basic level and weave in ends and then casting on and casting off. I honestly never wear this. When I first finished it and blocked it, I was so proud and I wore it everywhere for a little while. I just don't really wear it. It's not the best. There's loads of bits where I think I just like tied the ends rather than, oh, that looks terrible. And it's just really uneven. There was knots in the yarn that I didn't cut out. It's because it's just straight, it's bits where it looks thicker and thinner. Yeah, I don't wear this, but I can't bring myself to throw it out because it is the first thing I made, so it just stays in the back of my cupboard as a little keepsake. I still think that this was a really good project for me to start with, because it came with this kit where it had everything. There was instructional videos as well as written instructions. I do think kits like this are great for people that are wanting to get into knitting or crochet, to teach you the basics where it's very hand-holdy. So I don't regret doing this, it's not something that I would actually wear. Okay, so the second thing that I made when I started knitting was, I think, something that pretty much all new knitters these days do. So you've probably heard of it. It is infamous in the knitting world, and that is the Step by Step sweater by Florence Miller. As I was doing my research about how to start knitting, obviously came across this pattern. It's a free pattern. There's really detailed written instructions as well as a full YouTube video with all the extra add-ons that you can do, like short rows and folding the collar down, or doing an Italian bind off if you want to. It's so good, it's so detailed. And I also still go back to that video when I can't remember how to start my Italian bind off for the setup stitches. It's that helpful and clear. So I always recommend this to anyone who asks me how to start knitting or what pattern to start with. I think that some people like to start with things like washcloths and scarves like I did, or very small items. But I started knitting because I wanted to knit jumpers and sweaters because I wear them all the time, and that's just what I wanted to knit. So I just decided that I might as well just go straight in with something that I want to knit. I'm far more likely to be motivated to actually finish it then, and I'm so glad I did. So the stats on this, I started knitting it on the 22nd of February and I finished it on the 3rd of April. I used the yarn Drops Nepal in the colour Deep Ocean, which is this beautiful, let me just get it, like teal fabric with I'd say like marling on it. It's so dynamic looking. I apologise if the lighting's really rubbish. It's starting to get dark outside and it's just been pretty grey and dingy in the UK, so I've got my light on here, so it's probably looking a bit glary when I'm holding this up. But yeah, anyway, I got gauge on the recommended needle size, which I think is 4.5 and 5.5 needles, and I decided to do the folded collar because I thought I was more likely to get more wear out of it with a folded collar, although I do occasionally like to wear higher neck jumpers. I also decided to just go for it and add in the German short rows, which was at the time quite a challenge. And then obviously I learned to do the raglan increases. I remember that I made some mistakes in those increases, but I would just make up for the abnormal counts and the blank rows in between as such, and it worked out fine, you can't really tell. And I also did the Italian bind off at the hem and the cuffs. I think that I did that bind off still quite tightly. There's not a huge amount of stretch at the actual level of the bind off, is pretty stiff. I am quite a tight knitter. But yeah, I still wear this quite a lot. It has a good amount of positive ease. I think a lot of jumper patterns at the moment have so much positive ease, and it's just nice to have something that it still has positive ease, but it's not as loose fitting as other garments that I've knitted. Okay, so you'll have to excuse the little bit where my microphone is pinched, but this is my step-by-step sweater. I am so pleased with how this turned out. I love the colour. I think it really suits my hair colour and my skin tone. I'm really happy with the sleeve length. I think it sits perfectly. It doesn't really ride up too much when I'm moving. So it has definitely got a level of ease, but it is more fitted than some other jumpers that I have knitted, and sometimes that's just what I'm wanting to wear. So it's nice to have something that's slightly more fitted sometimes. I certainly would think about making this pattern again. I just think there's other basic raglan jumper patterns that I would want to try, just to try something different. So who knows whether I'll ever actually make this pattern again. So the next pattern that I knit is the Bliss sweater by Kuzo Knits. I found this pattern on Etsy and I immediately loved the cream and pistachio green coloured stripes on it with the oversized chunky fit and the balloon sleeves, and I knew I wanted to knit this, but I really regret knitting this now, and I'll go into that in a minute. But here's the stats. I knit it from April the 4th to April the 30th. I knit size 4, and for the cream stripes I used Drops Air and Drops Melody in the colour Off-White, and for the pistachio green I used Drops Melody held double in the colour Pistachio Ice Cream. I also needed to size up a whole 1mm for the needles, so I used 8 and 10mm needles. Now, why do I not like this jumper? Why do I regret doing it? So I should have seen some red flags when I was looking at the pattern. The first being that the designer knits entirely, or does entirely crochet patterns normally, and this was her only knitting pattern. That doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't going to be any good, but it should have been a bit of a warning sign to me that she's not normally a knitting pattern designer. She's obviously quite experienced at writing crochet patterns. Yeah, that was my first warning. I then found the sizing chart a bit confusing. I was not really sure what size to make, and I contacted the designer to ask for some advice, and her advice was also a bit vague. It was very much like, well, my bust circumference is 80 centimetres and I did it with 40 centimetres of positive ease. You decide what you want to do, which is fair enough, and I think if you maybe are more experienced, that might have been fine. I just found it a little bit confusing. I will say that the pattern is very beautifully presented, clearly laid out, and it also has some really nice little like YouTube shorts going through some of the more difficult techniques that are in the pattern, so I think that's really great. The other problem I ran into, which was my main issue with this pattern, was it's knit bottom up, which is fine if there's enough information, but there also was not a row gauge, and the pattern instructions did not say knit until 30 centimetres. It just said knit 5 rows of white, knit 5 rows of green. This is, I don't know if it was 5 rows, I can't remember. But there was no row gauge and also no centimetres to tell you, even if there was no row gauge, if you've done it long enough. So mine ended up terribly cropped. So I got to the point of being ready to cast on or pick up the sleeves. I tried it on and it was pretty much sitting like here, just under my bust. And I was thinking, okay, I think something's gone wrong here. I decided to just go ahead and knit the sleeves because I didn't know if I was going to have enough yarn to extend it or how much yarn I'd have left. And I knew that I'd obviously also have to extend the sleeves based on this. So I managed to do the sleeves. I extended, I think, an extra stripe or two, and then I think I did a bit of extra white at the bottom as well. And then I went back, I learned how to cut my knit and pick up the stitches, and then I knit down. So thankfully this was just in stockinette and I got away with doing that. And again, I think I added at least 2 more stripes. Yeah, I just felt entirely frustrated in this project by the end, and I'm glad I went back and fixed it because I do occasionally wear this, but that really wound me up. And the other thing that I learned, and this is my fault, is that the standard knit bind off that's recommended for the sleeves and the hem and for doing the folded collar, I knit far too tightly for this. I just can't do it. I do manage to get my wrists through, and over time the neckline is so stiff, but it has slightly stretched out so I can get my head through a little bit easier. And luckily the hem is just wide anyway, so it's fine. But I very much learned that I cannot do a standard knit bind off because I knit far too tightly for it, no matter what I try. So yeah, and my other thing is I find this far too warm. Even when it's quite cold here in the UK, I find myself getting really hot and sweaty if I wear this. And this is also where my strong dislike for Drops Air started. I'm all for budget yarns, and I think Drops are a really good company. I was going to talk about Drops Nepal, but I can talk about that in a bit. I think Drops Nepal is a really good budget yarn. Drops Air, I find it so inconsistent. It pills and felts horribly. It is sticky when you're working with it, and it really starts to flare out as you wear it, which you will see when I talk about my cloud sweater. So I'm a bit of a Drops Air hater. I think that's everything about this jumper, and I finished my rant so I can calm down now. I realised that I skipped out a little accessory project that I did before the Bliss sweater. I will put a picture because I don't know where it is right now, but I did a weekend hat by Petite Knit, and I made this one for my son, and so I knit the size 0 to 1 year, and I knit a matching one for myself, which I'll go through in a little bit. I knit this between March the 28th and May the 12th, which I don't know why it took me so long. Anyway, I used Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Bordeaux, and that was held double. And I didn't do a gauge swatch for this because it was such a small item. I just did the recommended needles of 3.5 millimeters, and it was definitely off gauge because I'm such a tight knitter, and I now know that I usually have to size up for petite knit patterns. But to be fair, because it is 1x1 rib, it stretches so much that it doesn't really matter. And even now my son is like 15 months, I still get it on his head. It's just a bit more like a tight fisherman's beanie, so it didn't really cause that much issue. I don't really have very much else to say about that. I love Knitting for Olive yarns. I would say that this takes longer than you expect because it is double folded, so you have to do this really, really long tube before you do the decreases. And for this pattern and for the one I made for myself, I did follow the pattern exactly, and I did those 2 sections of double knitting where the folds are. And after those 2, I realised that the double knitting just does not work really well for the folds, and it just ends up that you have this janky line showing. And so for future versions I've done, I have excluded that, and it's so much better without the double knitted sections. The next pattern I knit is another one that I'm just going to put a picture, and I can't show you because they are in the bin somewhere. And they are the I'm So Basic socks by Summerlee. I knit these from May the 1st, and I don't know when I finished them because I gave up on them. They are one of my frogged projects. So I wanted to learn to knit socks, and I just picked this sock pattern because it's a vanilla sock. It is a beginner friendly pattern, lots of videos, and very hold your hands through it, how to do it. It's done on magic loop, and I used Yarn Smith's merino sock 4-ply in the colour white and lavender. So I was doing white for the cuff and toes and heels, and lavender for the main body of the toe of the sock. And I used the recommended needle size of 2.25 millimeters. I just think that this project was a bit too ambitious at that point in my knitting experience. I really struggled with using the teeny tiny needles. I'd not done magic loop before. I kept dropping stitches and getting so angry when I couldn't pick them up because they were so tiny. Now I have no issue picking up drop stitches on the sock, but at the time it was just so challenging. And I was away on holiday with my husband, my baby and my parents, and they were laughing at me because they were saying, knitting is supposed to be relaxing, you're doing it to relax, why are you getting so stressed? Maybe don't do these socks. So yeah, it was very stressful. And I also stupidly decided, actually I don't want these boring plain vanilla socks, so I decided to make up my own little motif to do along the cuff, and that ended up being too tight because I did not understand colourwork knitting tension, so I then couldn't get it over my foot after I'd done the heel. So I then stupidly was like, well, if I cut the floats that wouldn't be a problem, and then it all just unravelled and I gave up. So I thought maybe sock knitting is not for me. I gave up on that dream of knitting some socks, but you will see that I did revisit that and I now love sock knitting. Yeah, those were my first socks and my first completely like frogged and abandoned project. Okay, next I made the cloud sweater by Petite Knit. I knit this from May the 13th to June the 20th and I did the size 2XL. I used Drops Air in the colour Moss Green and I held it with Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the colour Pea Shoots, which is such a beautiful colour, and I feel like I wasted that yarn on this jumper. I used 5.5mm needles, which is 1mm above the recommended size. That was based on my gauge swatch. And let me put it on. So here is my cloud sweater. I do overall really like this jumper. I love the rolled collar and sleeves and hem. I would definitely knit this pattern again. I don't know, I just think it's just like a really nice classic shape, but mine has stretched out and flared. You can probably see it kind of looks a bit silly at this point. When I first finished it and blocked it, it was much more like fitted and less flare on the bottom, and I've learned that that is because of the Drops Air. That is just what it does. I still wear it. I mostly do the classic millennial tuck, which I do anyway, so it's not that big a deal. And I do find this looks quite nice with like satin skirts, like black satin skirt, or I've got a black one with greeny dots that match quite well. So I do wear it, but yeah, that kind of annoyed me, and I very much learnt my lesson about Drops Air, and I wish I'd used something a bit nicer. It does also have some pilling and felting, but I don't think it's too terrible. It's getting so dark, so I apologise. Yeah, I think I extended the length of this pattern to get this length, and I also, instead of doing the standard knit bind off that is suggested, I did Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, and it meant that I could get everything over my head through my arms. I do think that you can, let me make sure you can see it. I do think that you can see the difference between this and the standard knit bind off, but if you don't know about knitting and if you don't look closely, I don't think anyone will notice. So it's not that big a deal, and it just meant that I could actually fit the garment, so it was fine. I think that's everything to say about this pattern, really. As I said, I would definitely knit this again, and I would quite like to redo it in a yarn that's not gonna do this flaring. Okay, the next thing I made, I love this project. I'm so proud of it. I think it is one of my proudest makes so far. I can't believe I can't believe I made it. I look at it and I think, did I make that? I don't know. It's too good. That sounds so humble of me. But it is the Homestead Sweater Baby, and the pattern is by Megan Faith Makes. I knit this between May the 23rd and July the 16th, and I knit the size 1 to 2 years, and this was for my son. I used the yarn Drops Air. This is my exception for using Drops Air. It was for a kid, my baby, and I think it's fine for that. It's nice and soft. The quality isn't as important because they're only going to wear it for a short amount of time, so I accepted that for this particular knit. And I'm not going to list out all the colours because there's like 10 of them, and you can see it on the pattern. And I used 4 and 3mm needles, I think. I'm pretty sure I used the recommended needles. I think I'm just slightly off on my row gauge, so I had to do a little bit of extra, I just did it on this guy at the top and also added some extra length in the neck. Decreases, increases. This is the sweater. Like, look how cute this is. I'm just obsessed. It's just adorable. It's this cute little farmscape. It was my first attempt at intarsia, my only attempt so far actually. It's not perfect. There are gaps and holes in some places that aren't really noticeable, and I think I kind of closed up when I was weaving in the gazillion ends. I do think it was good to learn to do intarsia because it's also just on the front and the rest is just blue. It's knit flat, as most intarsia tends to be, and then you seam it, I think at the shoulders and down the sides obviously, and then you knit the sleeves in the round. And then similarly to the cloud sweater, it's got the like ribbing with the rolled feature on the neckline and the cuffs, but not on the hemline at the bottom. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about this. It's just, as I say, one of my proudest makes. I just think it looks like a piece of art, and that's not because of anything I've done, that is because of the pattern design. So yeah, Megan Faith Makes has so many beautiful intarsia patterns, and I believe she's coming out with loads more. And also, in case anyone's interested, those are the, well, that is the back. It took me probably almost as long to weave in the ends as it did to knit the entire front panel, because there was just so many ends. I didn't really appreciate how many, even though all the videos I watched about intarsia said you just need to accept that there's going to be lots of ends to weave in. I think it was worth it. It was worth the effort. But I will say I knit a baby knit thinking, oh, it's a baby knit, it'll be really quick. It wasn't. If you want a quick baby knit, don't do intarsia. Moving on. I then did another weekend hat, and this one was my matching one for the one with my baby. I will grab it. So this is my weekend hat. I knit this between June the 13th and August the 3rd. Again, I do not know why it took me so long to do this, because I know that I can actually knit one of these in a week and a half normally. I don't know, I just obviously wasn't that motivated. I knit mine in the size medium, and instead of holding knitting for olive merino double, I held one strand of merino with one strand of soft silk mohair, but I still used the Bordeaux colour for both. For this one, I sized up to 4.5mm needles. I can show you a bit better now. This is the hat at its full length, and you can maybe see the what's it called, double knitting along here. And then if I put it on, you might be able to appreciate that it creates a bit of a line. I don't know if you can appreciate the line that is on here. I don't know. Oh, what the hell am I doing? It's not very well folded. That's not going to help. But yeah, you can see the double knitting line here. And I just don't think it looks very good. So I learned from this that the next time I was going to make it, just knit it without the double knitting. What I would say is, if you are going to use this yarn combination of knitting for olive merino and mohair, bear in mind that this makes a very drapey fabric. I found that when I later knit a size small for my mum and my sister, that actually fit my head much better. I wanted it to be a little bit more tight fitting. I find this just like a little bit baggy and loose on me, even though this was the right size for my measurements based on the pattern. I think that's partly just that this particular yarn combo ends up being quite drapey, but I don't know. So if I was going to knit another one for myself with knitting for olive, I would size down. I maybe would just size down anyway, because I know that 1x1 rib is going to be nice and stretchy. And that's also partly personal preference, because some of you might want a more baggy fit. The next one is another fail, and something that I did end up frogging eventually. So this one was the Sandro pullover from Flaminia Chini. I knit this from June the 20th, and I think I ended up frogging this in like November, December time, after letting it languish and picking it up and doing 1 or 2 rows and then never looking at it again for a month, and this just kept going on, and I just had no interest in doing it. This I knit was as the round neck version. She has recently released a V-neck version and I do love it. It's beautiful, it's a well-written pattern, there's nothing wrong with the pattern. I just, for some reason, had no motivation to do it and decided to just call it a day. I think part of my reissue was the colour of yarn I used. So I used Drops Daisy in the colour Light Nougat, and it was a stupid decision on my part. It was a really like pale beige colour and I just don't like that colour. It washes me out. I should have just picked a different colour and maybe I would have enjoyed knitting the project. I did find the yarn like a really nice soft yarn and I would consider trying it for a different pattern. So it's a shame I didn't get the full experience of how this yarn wears over time. Sorry, I didn't mention I knit the size 7 in this pattern and I had to go 0.5 millimetre up from the recommended needle size, so I used 3.54 and 4.5 millimetre needles. I don't really have anything else to say about this because I didn't finish the garment. I think I'd like joined under the neckline. I don't think I'd even got to joining in the round, or maybe I'd like just joined in the round, but I just wasn't picking it up. I frogged it, I sold the yarn, and someone else is gonna make something lovely with that yarn. So sometimes you just have to do it if you're not feeling it. Okay, next is one of my favourite garments that I've made for myself. I wanted to knit this from the beginning of starting knitting, and I think a lot of people have this aspiration. It may be a bit basic, but I don't really care. This is the Norma sweater by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I knit this from July the 18th to September the 12th, and I knit the 3XL. Let me put it on. This is her. This is her tucked in. Yeah, I just love this. I love wearing it up. I love folding the collar over. I wear it both ways. Yeah, she's just beautiful. I saw a few versions in this brown blue cream combo, and I think the new Norma maybe has this colour combo on the sample photos. I used Sandro's Garn, Tim Peer Gint, dark chocolate for the brown, held with Knitting for Olive mohair in the colour chocolate. I used Tim Peer Gint Natural Melange, held with Knitting for Olive mohair in the colour powder for the cream colour, and for the blue I held Sandro's Garn Sunday Double in the colour Ice Blue. I used 0.5 millimetre up from the recommended needle size, and I also, so I did this slip stitch seam on the side of the body, but I didn't do it on the sleeves. I just didn't want to have the seam on the sleeves. The one thing that I would change, and I did think about going back to do because I had enough yarn, I think I got a bit confused with the way the pattern was written and working out how many stripes I needed on the sleeves. I think I interpreted the actual instructions as being 6 stripes, but then it got to the end of that and it said you should have 7 stripes. And it was very confusing, so I thought I would just follow the actual, like, where it says repeat this 6 times or whatever it was. So that ended up with 6 stripes. And I looked at other people's and it was really varying how many stripes people had based on their sleeve length, and I thought that it would be fine. I do think that they are a little bit on the short side. I'd say it's like bracelet length, and when I'm stood straight it looks fine, but when I'm doing things they ride up to my elbow, and to be honest it's fine. I've kind of grown to love that because it means that they don't get in the way when I'm doing housework and things. When I'm at home it's fine. I have decided I'm not going to go back and change it, and it's quite nice to have one jumper in my wardrobe that has slightly shorter sleeves. What I would say as well is that the pattern does not include a chart for the colour work, and it is very much like written row by row by row, and you have to really concentrate on it because of that. And I know a lot of people don't like that of the pattern. I think that works quite well for beginners, although it just doesn't teach beginners how to read a colour work chart. So yeah, I know a lot of people don't like that element of the pattern, but for me, it was worth it for the finished object. Another gripe that a lot of people have with the pattern is the fact that the gauge swatch very specifically instructs you to knit it flat, even though the whole pattern is knit in the round, which is a little bit weird. I didn't find it too much of an issue because I find my gauge is pretty similar between knitting in the round and knitting flat. But for some people, it might become an issue. You may notice some clips I'm wearing a different t-shirt, and that's because I ended up having to stop filming yesterday because partly it was too dark outside and secondly my phone died. So I think I'd been filming for like 5 minutes without even realizing that my phone had died. Anyway, the next thing in this list that I made was the baby bear suit by Pernille Larsen, who is the designer for knitting for Olive, and this is the cutest little baby suit ever, and I made it for my sister for her baby that she had in the beginning of February, and I will make this for I think every person in my life that has a baby because it is adorable. I knit this between August the 3rd and August the 16th, so it was a nice quick knit. I knit it in the size 1, and I used the recommended yarn, which is Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Brown Nougat, and I used the recommended needles, which is 3 and 4 millimeters. However, I did not gauge swatch. I thought because it's just a baby thing, it doesn't really matter so much, and I probably should have gauge swatched because the fabric ended up being really stiff and firm. And I know from other people that Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino can be a bit like this, but generally, from what people say, it blocks out a little bit more drapey than mine did. And yeah, even after blocking, it was just like really stiff. So I've come to the conclusion that I should have sized up my needles to some degree. And I keep meaning to measure it when I see my sister just to actually know what my gauge ended up being, but I always forget. So I will at some point check what my gauge was on that. But she sent me a few photos of her little boy wearing it, and it's still massive on him because he's only a month old, but it's so adorable, and I found it really fun doing the construction of this. It's quite different. There's lots of short rows, so make sure that you're comfortable doing short rows. But yeah, it's just so cute. So yeah, we're going back to my journey in sock knitting, and this is where it started to go much better. I knit the Itty Bitty Berry socks by Stone Knits. The lighting is terrible, I'm so sorry. These are the cutest little spring summer socks. They have this gorgeous picot edge feature. They've got these cute little strawberries. Yeah, I decided to do colourwork socks because I thought I'd be far more motivated seeing the motifs coming along, and I was right. I was obsessed. I knit these fairly quickly for a pair of socks. So I knit these between August the 16th and 27th. I think this is the quickest I've knit socks so far. I used the size 3. I have quite wide feet and I have high instep, so this fit my foot well. I used Cascade Heritage in red and cedar green for the strawberries, and I used Rico Design Superb Tweed for the cream. They've got these beautiful flecks of vibrant colours in the tweed, and yeah, they probably look a bit grubby. I can stick these in the wash, and I do, but because it's a very light coloured background yarn, they do just look grubby now. It's fine, I just wear them at the house. Also used the recommended needle size of 2.25 and 2.5 millimeter needles. I then knit another Stone Knits pattern of the herding cow socks. I don't have these because they ended up going to my sister. I knit these between September the 3rd and October the 4th. Again, I knit size 3. I used the background green was from Pixie Yarn's sock yarn called Bryophyte, so that's the colour, and it's this beautiful dynamic green that I just thought looked perfect for like a grassy field. And then I got a load of various other hand-dyed yarns and some Lang Jowl for all the cow colours. Yeah, these are so cute. I was kind of knitting them for myself, but my sister loves Highland cows, and even though these aren't Highland cows, I asked her if she wanted them, and she was like, yes please. So she's got them. She's worn them loads. While she was pregnant, she found them like really cozy and comforting to make herself feel comfortable at home, and I just saw her wearing them so much, which was really nice. So yeah, my sister is we're the owner of these socks, and she has been under strict instructions on how to wash them, not in the washing machine because you can't with this yarn. And I think she's been taking good care of them, so we're all good. Next, I knit something that's on every knitter's list, the Sophie hood. Again, another basic pattern, but I am so glad I knit this. I didn't really want to do the Sophie scarf or the Sophie shawl. At the time, I felt I wouldn't really wear the tiny little scarf, and I really loved the little hood situation. So I knit this from the 9th to the 28th of September. I took this as a holiday project when we went to Croatia. It was nice and reasonably small, and I knit the size medium, and to be honest, if I'd knitted the large, I think I would have given up because it is mindless. I used the recommended yarn, which is Itty Soft in the colour 2S, which is a nice grey colour, and I used 5.5mm needles, which is 0.5 millimetre above the recommended needle size. So yeah, this is part of a set of accessories that I'm wanting to make, that the intention is that they're all going to be grey. So I've got this, I've got some grey mittens, which I'll show you, and I'm planning to make a grey hat, which I think will be the muscle bra. But yeah, I always put it on like this first and tie it like that, and then take the hood down if I don't need it. I just love this, it's cute. If you want to keep your ears and head warm, put the hood up. Yeah, I love this pattern. I didn't love making it. It's just like mindless garter stitch. It goes on forever. It starts really quickly when you're doing the increases at the beginning, but then you get to this point and then you're knitting straight. That's one of my baby's toys. And then you're decreasing and then increasing again, and then you've got to do the whole thing back the other way. I was getting really tired of it. I was just knitting so fast to try and get it done in the end, but I am glad I knit it. I still would knit another one probably at some point, even though it was pretty boring. I do recommend this pattern, as much as it is a very basic thing that everyone makes. It's a good pattern. There's a reason it's popular. Okay, I feel like we're getting there, but maybe we're not. Just still a lot. Next is a pattern that I knit for my husband. That is the Loom sweater by Ruthman Design. I knit this between September 16th and October the 22nd, and I knit a size 2. I used drops Nepal in the colour Dark Ivy, and I can't remember, and I didn't write it down on my Ravelry notes. I think I used 0.5 millimetre up from the recommended needle size. Let me grab it. So this is my husband's Loom sweater. This is the only garment that I've ever put a label in, because I knew that my husband would put it on wrong otherwise. I think this is such a lovely, slightly elevated raglan pattern. It has this beautiful woven texture on the neckline, the cuff, and the hem, and it's also a split hem, so it just looks really nice on. I'll put pictures of him wearing it. I can wear it. It's a bit tighter fitting on me because of my chest, and I'm just generally slightly larger than my husband, and it's longer than I would wear. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing this woven. It's kind of cabling, but it's like 1x1 cables, so it was just a really interesting way of doing it. And I mean, maybe some of you will have come across it before, but it was just so interesting seeing how this woven basket weave pattern was created. And I just think that this is such an elevated raglan, where it could be slightly smarter. And my husband wears it to work, but he also just wears it for wearing around the house and things as well. This is where I'll talk about drops in a pool. You can probably see how badly it is pilled and felted. I'm hoping you can see that. Pilled and felted along the sleeves and underarms, and I've had the same issue on my step-by-step sweater. I've had to depill it quite a bit. I really need to depill this one for my husband. He works in an office and is like kind of on rubbing his arms on the desk quite a lot, and that's why it's pilled a lot under the arms for him. It's probably worse for his than mine. I think Drops and Paul is a really, really good budget yarn. It's like really sturdy. It's slightly rustic, not too bad softness wise. I don't find it too itchy. Some people may find it itchy, but yeah, I find it fine. And it's pretty cheap as far as yarns go, so I think that it's a really good budget yarn. You just have to bear in mind that it pills and felts quite a lot as you wear it. Next is another little project. These are my autumn leaf socks by Stone Knits, and they're part of the Forever Autumn sock set. I just use the recommended needle size. Stone Knits patterns tend to follow the same basic formula. The stitch count might be slightly different between them, and they obviously have the different motifs, but they've all got a similar structure. They all use the same no wrap short row heel and the same toe technique. So once you've done one or two of the patterns, it's quite nice to go back to them and just kind of know what you're expecting. I used for the background colour Lana Grossa Melon White Tweed 100, I think, in the colour cream. Let me check. No, Natural Melange. And then all the colours of the leaves, I hunted for the perfect yarns for this, and I found this set of mini skeins from Pixie Yarns, and it's called Footsteps 2 20-gram mini set, and it just had these perfect like range of autumn leaf colours. It was just exactly what I was looking for. So I have loads left over from this actually. I'll be able to use scraps for other projects, but I just think they're perfect autumn socks. And I didn't really want to just do like green leaves because I felt like it would maybe look a bit like cannabis socks. If you want cannabis socks, I think this pattern would work well. The next thing that I made was part of my gift knits, so I will talk about them all together, even though they weren't necessarily in order, and they were all the same pattern. So I used the weekend hat pattern from Petite Knit because I already had it, and I decided I was going to make my mum and my dad for Christmas some hats, and then I ended up also making one for my sister with leftovers. So the first one I made was for my dad. I knit it between October the 24th and November the 1st, and I made the size large. I used the yarn Rowan Felted Tweed in the colour Seafarer, and I used 4.5mm needles, so again a whole millimetre above the recommended needle size. I love the colour of this and the look of the yarn, but I would not recommend this yarn in general. It kept snapping all the time and I was just getting so annoyed. It would snap right down to the needle and I was having to unravel it and re-knit in a new piece. And it happened quite a few times. So yeah, I would not purchase this yarn again, which is a shame because otherwise I did like it. I then also made a weekend hat for my mum using Knitting for Olive Merino and Soft Silk Mohair in the colour Slate Green. This one I knit between December the 3rd and the 19th. Again, same information, same needles. The only difference was that I did a size small for my mum. And following this, I used the scraps from mine and my mum's, so the burgundy and the green, to make a striped one for my sister. Only issue with that, like, it's beautiful, I love it, and I wish I'd kind of made it for myself, but I made a bit of a rookie error in that I forgot that it was folded brim, double folded brim. So I stupidly carried the floats of the stripes. I should have just left them loose and woven them in, because when you fold the hat, you can see the floats that I carried. So I then ended up cutting some of the longer ones and trying to weave them in with difficulty because it was such short little stubby ends. So yeah, that was a bit of a rookie error for me. And if I did it again, I would leave them hanging out and weave them in, or even knit part of it inside out, if that makes sense. I don't know how it would work, but I would need to have a think about it if I did this again. And hers was also in a size small. And those 3 hats that I did as gift knits, I didn't put the double knit stripes for the folds, and they work so much better. So if anyone is making that pattern, just leave out the double knit stripe bits. Next is going kind of back, I guess, to something I did as part of a knit along. It was a pattern that I had in my list to do, and then I saw they were doing a knit along, so I thought I might as well use that as my excuse to make the pattern. And it's honestly, I think, the most beautiful thing I've made so far. They are the Ginger Mittens by Dorothy Officiers, or Adorable Knits she's known by. I knit this from November the 2nd to November the 10th, so this was a really quick knit. I was surprised considering it's cabled mittens. I thought it would take longer, but once you got into a flow and like worked your head around the pattern repeat, it was just so quick. Let me show you. These are the mittens. Hopefully you can see. I'll just put one of them down. They are so pretty. They're just so pretty. My husband always says to me I shouldn't wear them because they're too pretty to wear, but what's the point in that? So I do wear them. I love the twisted or half twisted rib. I can't remember which one it was, to be honest. I don't know enough about it to work it out by looking at it. I think it was twisted rib. It's just so neat, and like that goes up into the thumb. Yeah, and even like along the sides, the cabling, just such a beautiful pattern. I knit them using Filcolana Panilla in the colour Very Light Grey, and their Tilia in the colour Silver. This yarn combination is just so luxurious. Other than knitting for Olive, I think that Filcolana are my favourite yarns that I've used so far. Panilla and Tilia together is just so soft. It's not itchy. It just feels really special. And then I've used Tilia along with Saga and Alweta on one of my whips, and that is also just so soft, fluffy, cozy. So yeah, I am a big fan of Filcolana yarns, and I know a lot of people really like their Peruvian one. I've not tried that one yet, but I definitely want to. The next thing that I knit is this Olga sweater. Again, I feel like every knitter goes through this, particularly if you're on social media, Instagram, TikTok, because these things just seem to go viral and everyone's making them, and then you just get FOMO, and I had to join in. This is obviously a pattern by Petite Knit. I knit it between November the 9th and December the 11th. I annoyingly didn't write down the size that I knit on my Ravelry, but I'm pretty sure I did the 2XL. Most of the Petite Knit jumpers that I have done, I've done 2XL. I say most, I've only done a couple, but I'm pretty sure it's 2XL. I used Drops Cotton Merino in the colour Burgundy and Jeans Blue, and I used 4 and 4.5 millimeter needles, so that was half a millimeter above the recommended needle size. So for this one, I was looking at colour ideas. I saw some burgundy and blue striped Olgas and other similar jumpers that were burgundy and blue stripes, and I knew I wanted to do that colour combo, and I struggled to find the yarn. I saw someone on TikTok talk about how she made her Olga in Drops Cotton Merino and loved it. I thought it was a good transitional yarn to use, where I was finding a lot of my wool jumpers, like full 100% wool jumpers, way too warm for most of the time. So I wanted to do this in something that was going to be a little bit less hot when the weather isn't that cold. So I settled on Drops Cotton Merino, and I saw that they had a burgundy colour, but that had been discontinued, and I managed to find it on a website, I think somewhere in Estonia, that shipped to the UK, and I paid a lot of shipping to get it shipped to the UK. They were literally emailing me like, are you sure you want to order this? Because the shipping's quite expensive. But I had my heart set on this colour combo. So I just was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll just take it. And the burgundy ended up being a bit more like raspberry pinky red than I wanted. I really wanted like a deep burgundy, like the Knitting for Olive Bordeaux colour. But this is how it worked out. I was really nervous when I started knitting up the swatch whether I was actually going to like this as a finished piece. It's a bit more vibrant than I was intending. My vision was essentially what Petite Knit has now brought out as the Olga blouse, that colour that she has with the burgundy and blue stripes on the Olga blouse. That is exactly what I had in my mind when I was planning this. So it's not quite that, but I love this jumper. I love the sleeves. I love the drop shoulder. I think drop shoulders just really suit me. I love the general fit of this. It has a good amount of positive ease. I can chuck it on over things. And I really like the kind of striped ribbing, and then the colour blocked folded neckline. I just think it looks really good. It looks nice with blue jeans. It's a much more like casual jumper, I think. I don't think I could wear this in a smart setting, but and then this is how it looks tucked. But yeah, I really like this. My only issues are with the quality of the yarn. I think overall I'm pleased with the yarn choice, and I would use Cotton Merino Blend again, but it was really splitty to work with, and I think that has caused some issues that I've noticed now over time, like this here. I don't know if you can see, I've got a few sections like that where the yarn is split and poking through, which doesn't look great. And then you can probably see under the arms it looks a bit kind of felted and muddy looking, where the colours, I don't think they've like bled into each other, but like where it's pilled and felted, it just looks a bit mucky. And this is freshly washed as well. So the yarn hasn't held up as well as I would have liked, but it's not too bad. It was, I think, a good choice for what I was looking for, and I do wear this quite a lot, so it's kind of expected that there's going to be a little bit more wear on it, so I don't regret it. The next thing I made is something I will put a picture if I can find it. I don't even know if I have a good picture. Essentially, it was cold weather. My son, we were out for a walk in the pram. I was not in the pram, he was. And his hands got really cold and he was crying, and I didn't have any gloves with me. And I just thought, why don't I just knit him some? I feel like I could knit a pair of mittens in the amount of time that it would take to order some and get them delivered or go out somewhere. So I used the leftover Rowan felted tweed from my dad's weekend hat to knit some little mittens. I used the pattern The World's Simplest Mittens by Tin Can Knits, and I did this from November the 19th to November the 22nd. I believe this pattern is one that goes from like baby size to adult size, and I'm pretty sure it was an any gauge pattern, which is great. Again, I used the Rowan felted tweed in the colour Seafarer, and I used 3.25 and 3.75 needles for that. I also adapted the pattern slightly using the I-cord attachment that was on the tiny baby mittens that I knit. So that wasn't part of this pattern, but I added them on so that my little boy wouldn't be able to chuck them out of the pram, because he likes to pull gloves and socks off all the time. So that was just something I added on. It was quite easy. Yeah, they were just a quick practical little knit, although I do think I probably could have ordered a pair of gloves or mittens and got them quicker than it took me to knit them, but it just felt nice to do them. And finally, this is my last finished object up until the 14th, 15th of February, which was my 1 year knitting anniversary. This is the Lanark sweater stockinette, which I did as a test knit for Rebecca Clow. I knit this from December the 19th to February the 2nd. I knit a size 7, and I used Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Thundercloud and the mohair in the colour Rainy Day. And I used 4 and 4.5mm needles, which were 0.5 millimetre above the recommended needles. I won't talk too much about this one because I talked about it in my knitting podcast that I posted. But yeah, this is such a good knit that you can just throw on over things. It's got quite a bit of positive ease and drape, which means I can wear layers underneath. Again, I like tucking things in. The sleeves are a good length. I just knit them to the pattern, I believe. And I think I did the body to pattern as well. That's kind of it really. It's nice, lightweight jumper that I can throw on over things. I just still don't feel too warm even if I have a couple of layers underneath. I actually wore this to go out on a very cold and damp hike on the weekend, and it was such a good layer under my rain jacket. And having this up above my neck meant I didn't really need to take a neck cowl with me. It's just so versatile, this jumper, and I would definitely knit it again. I keep trying to fix this top bit where the zip is, but I need to properly do it. I would knit this pattern again in both stockinette and half fisherman's rib version. Yeah, love it. I recommend everyone knits it. Such a good wardrobe staple. That is everything that I knit in my first year of knitting, and I can't remember if I said at the beginning, but please bear in mind that this was all knit while I was on maternity leave. I had a lot more time to knit when my baby was sleeping or playing if he didn't need me to play with him. Obviously there were times that he did, and yeah, I was home a lot, so I got through a lot of knitting. Now that I'm back in work, I am not knitting anywhere near as much as I was when I was on maternity leave. This is my only finished object since the new year, and that's just how it is. So please don't compare yourselves to what I knit in that first year, because I appreciate that is a lot of stuff and most people don't have the luxury of time to be able to do that, and I don't anymore. So yeah, that was just a bit of an exceptional circumstance, and maybe not realistic for most people. Some people do knit that much and work and everything else, but yeah, basically just don't compare yourself to how much or how little other people knit. You just go at your own pace. We're doing this hobby to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching this video if you've got this far. I hope you've enjoyed me running through all of my knits from my first year of knitting, and I hope that it wasn't too rambly and boring. I appreciate also that this is a very, very long video, so I know that a lot of you may not have watched the whole thing. But yeah, I love watching these videos of what people knit in a year or anything knitting related. So if you have enjoyed it, please let me know. And also let me know what sort of things you knit in your first year of knitting, or what you would recommend as patterns for new knitters, because I'm always interested to see how different people start knitting in different ways. So yeah, please let me know in the comments, and I hope you come back again.